Inside the Beltway, I'm holding in my hand a brand new book, Only the Strong, Reversing the Left's Plot to Sabotage American Power. You can only pre-order this book by Senator Tom Cotton because it doesn't come out till November. But I'm reading on my pre-publication book, the back of it, it's promising a pre-publication buzz and awareness campaign. So I think we qualify under that, Senator Cotton. Good morning.
Good morning, Hugh. I'm glad that you got your advanced copy of Only the Strong and look forward to discussing it at much greater length when it comes out on November 1. But as you said, if you want to make sure you get a copy right on November 1, you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and the other website that supplies books and order Only the Strong right now.
You can, and in fact, if you go and get Only the Strong, you'll have it on November 1. It's going to drop right before the election, and I hope the book tour is very successful, Senator Cotton, because the little bit that I have read thus far, I literally got it on Sunday. And please don't send one to Dwayne because he'll steal it. But if Only the Strong is read by people, they will find in there, you are an Army guy, but you make the case for rebuilding the Navy, among other things. And I found that first, and it's important for people to realize you are not parochial in your case for rebuilding the American military.
Not at all, Hugh. Though I served in the Army, I'm also a navalist, and I recognize the critical contributions that the Air Force and the Marine Corps and the Space Force all make as well to American power. Military power is not the only form of power, and it's not the form of power you'd like to use to achieve your national objectives. But as I explain in Only the Strong, military power undergirds everything else. Our financial and economic power, our diplomacy, our political relationships. Without a strong and unchallenged military, all those other elements of American power are weakened.
Senator Cotton and I are going to spend at least a segment a day for the week up to publication talking about Only the Strong, because I want it in people's hands when they vote on November the 8th. Senator Cotton, one more comment about this before we go to the actual news of the day. It's the transition. The subtitle of Only the Strong is Reversing the Left's Plot to Sabotage American Power. That will trigger some lefties. Chapter 2, The Progressive Roots of Decline. I want to illustrate what you're talking about in the subtitle of Only the Strong, Reversing the Left's Plot to Sabotage American Power, by playing for you Mandela Barnes, a new clip of the would-be Democratic senator who's running against your friend and my guest Ron Johnson, who was just on. Mandela Barnes and John Fetterman are the most radical Senate candidates I can ever remember. And Mandela Barnes said this in a clip that surfaced on Grabian yesterday, cut number 4.
We have to pledge to continue to push forward on that journey of progress and equity. We have to emphasize the importance of grassroots work in every community to push not only our federal and state representatives, but also our local elected officials. And as we've seen over the last several weeks, our school board members especially. And I didn't even get to the point about critical race theory. That's something else, too. It would be foolish to assume that the wealth of America was earned justly.
Critical race theory, it would be foolish to assume that the wealth of America was earned justly. Senator Cotton, my folks got here in 1868, penniless from Ulster. They farmed. My dad went to school, got to go to school. My mom didn't, and they made a lot. I just cannot stand when leftists say the wealth of America was not earned justly.
Yeah, Hugh, and I bet also a bunch of hardworking Wisconsinites who have scrimped and saved during a lifetime, maybe built up equity in their home, maybe saved enough money to send their kid to school or take a nice vacation every now and then, would also wonder why Mandela Barnes thinks that their small savings that they've built up has not been earned justly through their hard work and through their effort. But this is part of the point I make in Only the Strong, that the left has had a plot to sabotage American power, going back 100 years to Woodrow Wilson and the Progressives when they repudiated the moral foundation of America's constitutional republic, repudiating the Declaration of the Constitution. Once you do that, it's a fairly quick slide to what you saw in the 1960s and 70s with the Blame America First Democrats, as UN Ambassador Gene Kirkpatrick called them. And Mandela Barnes is just yet another example of how radicalized the left has become over the last century. What you see happening in our country today, it's not an accident, it's not misfortune, it's not the result of incompetence or naivete. It is a deliberate plan. Like, don't for a minute believe that the chaos you see at our border is just because Joe Joe Biden is incompetent or naive. This is exactly what he and his party intended. This is the logical outcome of it. Or look at what's going to happen this week in New York when Iran is going to be condemning America and saying that we and Europe need to let them off the hook and give them all kinds of sanctions relief. That's not the result of a bad deal that Barack Obama struck. Barack Obama struck the exact deal that he wanted to because he believed that America was to blame for decades of tension and conflict between the United States and Iran. And Senate candidates like Mandela Barnes and John Fetterman, who I agree are in a very close competition for the most radical leftists ever nominated for the United States Senate in a competitive race, would just continue that plan to undermine the sources of American power, our economy, our energy sources, our military, and they would weaken America.
Now, Senator Cotton, we are coming up to campaign season and all news disappears, but I've got to ask you about the riots sweeping Iran in the aftermath of the murder of a woman held for the lack of appropriate dress by the mullah standards. There are riots everywhere in Iran, as well as reports that the supreme leader, Khamenei, not the president who's coming to New York, but the supreme leader, Khamenei, is on his deathbed. Will Obama freeze in the headlights the way that will Biden freeze in the headlights the way that President Obama did when the Green Revolution tried to get going in Iran in the first year of President Obama's presidency?
Well, Hugh, he won't take action to support these brave Iranians who are rising up in protest against their evil theocratic dictators. But I want to come back to the key point of only the strong. Obama didn't freeze in the headlights. Obama did exactly what he wanted to do in 2009. He believed that America was to blame for tension with Iran. And therefore, he was going to bend over backwards. He was going to extend an outstretched hand, as he said in the early days of his presidency, to Iran rather than a clenched fist. He was not going to take any action that would undermine his long-term goals of having a grand bargain that would atone for America's sins in his eyes and bring Iran into the civilized world and treat them as a normal nation. And if the price of that was the slaughter of a bunch of brave Iranians who were protesting against dictators in the streets in the summer of 2009, from Obama's point of view, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And Joe Biden and the team that he has around him, which is largely the same team that Obama had around him, view it the exact same way. They are not going to take any steps that undermine their efforts to re-enter this terrible deal on even worse terms. So they're not exactly going to freeze or be incompetent or naive. Again, they're doing this deliberately.
We will discuss at length. Again, my plan for Only the Strong is to talk to Senator Cotton in 5 segments that we can play for the 5 days leading up to publication day, and then have a longer segment on pub day. But 12 books usually, that's the imprint, 12 of Hachette. And 12 usually prints enough books that they don't run out when there's a run on the books. There will be a run on this book, Senator Cotton. Have you got a publication commitment from 12 that it will not run out?
Well, at a certain level, an author or a publisher would be happy if you run out of the first run of books if it's big enough. But no, we've had a great relationship with 12 books over the last years. I've been working on this book, and I know that they've got a very robust first printing, but if you want to make sure that you get your copy of Only the Strong on November 1, I'd encourage you to go on the web today and pre-order a copy. So you make sure you have it at the very beginning of the
Senator, I want to switch to Ukraine. I ran into General Kellogg in the green room at Fox, special report, last week, and we talked about what the Russians are evidencing on the battlefield. General Kellogg told me that the American doctrine is we leave no soldier behind. The Russian doctrine is run away. And as a result, the Russians are running away because if they get wounded, they're not going to get picked up by their buddies. Would you elaborate on the American doctrine and Russian morale and why they are different?
Yeah, I mean, the American doctrine is informed in part by the nature of our country and our bonds to each other. I mean, we have a volunteer army that joins together to fight on behalf of a system of government that treats every person with equal dignity and respect. And whether that soldier is going to be a private or a general on the battlefield, we will spare no expense to make sure we bring them back, dead or alive. As I write in Only the Strong, this is part of the story of what happened in the Battle of Mogadishu. We got to where we were in Mogadishu on October 3rd, 1993, because of Bill Clinton's terrible mistakes. Mistakes he made largely because he feared being portrayed as weak, which is another bad Democratic tendency. But when the second Black Hawk helicopter went down, while all those Rangers and Delta operators were trying to secure the first one, the two Delta operators, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart, insisted that they be put down on the ground, even though it meant near certain death for them, because they thought, one, it might save some of the pilot and the crew's lives, and two, it would help them bring the remains back. The reason why the first helicopter, though, was still crash site was still being guarded is because one of the pilots, though dead, was trapped inside the helicopter, and all those Rangers and Delta operators refused to leave the site until they could get his body out, and that not a single one of them doubted or questioned that decision. Contrast that with what you see in Ukraine, with Russian soldiers and leaders routinely leaving behind not just dead soldiers, but wounded soldiers to die or to be taken captive. And again, it goes back to their system of government. Most of these people are conscripts. Increasingly, they're getting people out of prisons and dragooning them into service, who are not fighting on behalf of anything noble or great or grand, but only for the delusions of the Russian dictator. It just creates a very different kind of ethos among soldiers on the front lines, as we've seen time and time again in the Western way of war, defeating, whether it's increasingly Russia on the battlefield in Ukraine, Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan or Kaiser's Germany or so forth.
You know, if anyone wants to persuade a voter on November 1, pre-order Senator Cotton's book, Only the Strong, get a good supply of them, and then give them the book in the week before voting. November 1 is pub date for Only the Strong. Do that, pre-order. You can do it today at Amazon.com. I'll post a link shortly. Senator Cotton, I have less than 30 seconds. Do you think Zelensky can actually get the Crimea back?
It's unclear yet, Hugh. I mean, war ebbs and flows, and it's hard to predict. And as Churchill said, once you've set sail on that journey, you never know where the tides and the winds and the hurricanes will blow. But right now, they're certainly on the offensive. Precondition for getting back Crimea is getting back the rest of southern Ukraine. But certainly, the momentum is running in the way of the Ukrainians right now. And that's why I think we need to continue to back them to the hilt.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. We'll talk again when we do the pre-tape. We talk every week about current events, but I just got my Only the Strong. Remember, don't send one to Dwayne or it'll never get to me. Only the Strong, available at Amazon.com right now. That's pre-publication buzz right there. I didn't know I was part of that, but that's what it is. Thank you, Senator Cotton.